Hello to all the debt warriors listening, and welcome back to another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. I'm your host, Katie Fata. Being unbanked refers to adults who don't use or don't have access to any traditional financial services, including savings accounts, credit cards, or personal checks. A cashless society is one where cash, paper, and coin currency isn't used for financial transactions. Today, I'll be going into more details about being unbanked and cashless societies. I'll be joined again by Kim Cole, who is one of Navicore's community engagement managers. Kim and I will be discussing who the unbanked are, pros and cons of a cashless society, Bitcoin, and much more. Now let's get to my interview with Kim. Hi, Kim. Thanks for joining me again on the podcast today.
Katie, thank you for having me.
I'm always grateful to have you on. You're such a great guest. So today we're going to be talking about a topic that we've never covered on the podcast before. We're going to be talking about being unbanked and about what a cashless society is. So let's start with talking about being unbanked. So what does it mean if someone is unbanked?
Well, somebody that is unbanked essentially is someone that doesn't use a bank or any of the banking kind of products that we can get, such as savings accounts and checking accounts and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, it's, for adults who don't use banks or banking institutions at all. So who are these people that are unbanked?
Well, what we tend to see in the unbanked market are those that are of a lower income, maybe in a less educated household, so they don't understand how the products work. But also what we've seen over the years is that as more and more people come to this country from other countries, that they may not feel safe using banks because in their particular country, the banking system may be corrupt, something along those lines. So there's definitely a trust factor that comes into play.
Do you think there are certain minorities? Do you think they're more affected about being unbanked rather than everyone else?
I think that for the longest time, the industry as a whole has marketed its products and its advertising to those that were not households of color. And I think that creates kind of a hole. And so, yes, I do believe that there is a big missing piece when it comes to households of color.
Yeah, I think that. And then I think there might also be parts of the country that are more susceptible to being unbanked than others, like maybe more in the South, the Midwest, rather than up in the Northeast. They might not be, there might be a higher percentage in those areas rather than in the Northeast or in the West.
What you find is what's known as banking deserts. And this is something that the FDIC has been working on trying to eliminate. And that could be where the closest bank could be a half an hour, 45-minute drive from your home. So for those of us that live in a more suburban area with an influence of a big city, I step out my door and there are 4 different banks within a 5-minute drive. So banking deserts are definitely a real problem in this country.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up too, because people might be unbanked because of the fact that there aren't any banks near them. And it just might be too much of a hassle to go to a bank. So I don't need it.
Yes.
You know, even like, I mean, we're in the Northeast and there are banks everywhere. And even for me to like actually go to the bank, which is not even 5 minutes away, I'm like, oh, this is annoying. So I can't even imagine if it's a half hour away. I would like,
yes.
Yeah. So other than, you know, a bank being far away, why do people choose to remain unbanked?
in the work that I do through our community outreach efforts, an area of concern that is shared with me is the clients that are experiencing a financial hardship, and they are concerned about their funds being vulnerable to being taken from the bank through court order for repayment of debt, that or child support or something along those lines. That can be a real concern.
Do you think there's maybe like lack of trust too with the banks? Is that why people maybe remain unbanked?
I think those that have watched the economy, we've seen some that still really do resent what happened in 2008. And they would prefer not to utilize banks for that reason. We see just people in general that just handing their money over, particularly if there's somebody who's like paid in cash, that's scary, and depending on where you are within the country, you may see a number of people who work under the table or are undocumented and being paid in cash. They're afraid what's going to happen to their money.
Are there any issues if you're unbanked? If so, why is being unbanked maybe a problem?
So being unbanked can be a problem because we have some really great products within our banks that allow you to build wealth. But in addition to that, if you are taking your money and leaving it in a shoebox or leaving it under your mattress, it takes being robbed once, a fire, something like that, and all of your money is gone. Where if your local bank caught on fire, as long as you didn't have more than $250,000 in that entire, banking organization, your money would still be safe. And I think that's something to seriously consider.
Yeah, also that is a good point, because if someone like robs you and they steal your debit card, it's so easy to just cancel it. But if you steal your cash, you're like, you can't get that back.
You can't get that back. And I can give you a very, very simple story. Both of my daughters take horseback riding lessons. And I received a notice from the farm saying that we owed roughly a month's worth of lessons, paying for, a month worth. And I can assure you, I have never missed a payment because we pay cash at the time of the lesson. Unfortunately, I have no way to say that we indeed paid these lessons, even though I know in my heart we did.
Right.
Had I written a check, which would, and I do have a checking account, would have required the checking account, I would have been able to say, hey, you cash these checks, or they're dated. No. Now, instead, I'm paying twice for 2 months of lessons. And that makes a big difference in my budget. Simple things like that we don't necessarily think about. Having a bank account can really make the difference.
What do you think the difference is about being unbanked versus underbanked as well? Because I think sometimes those go hand in hand. So let's talk about that.
I agree. So, if you come in and you're putting away a lot of money into a savings account that you have no intentions of touching, and the interest rate is 0.01%, I'm exaggerating a bit, but not by much. What you're not investigating is that your bank may have better savings vehicles, such as a CD or something along those lines, where you may be getting a much higher return on that savings. I think that it's not just about having a bank account. It's about understanding what's available to you through that bank and what you can take advantage of. Because when push comes to shove, less than 1% versus, 5 to 8% of a return is significant.
And I also think I think a lot of millennials are classified as underbanked as well.
But, part of that too, Katie, I think is that the millennials got a little bit of financial education in school. They didn't get a lot of financial education in school. I really do believe that it is lack of education that is keeping them underbanked. And I believe we're going to start talking briefly about kind of a cashless way of things. And that can also be a reason for being underbanked.
Yeah, so let's jump right into that. So let's talk about a cashless society. So what is a cashless society, and how would a cashless society affect those who are unbanked?
So a cashless society, essentially, you're looking at a world in which there's no physical money. You're not going to walk in to the local convenience store and pay $1.25 for a pack of gum. So it's going to be replaced all by digital currency. The problem is that if you are unbanked, we really don't know exactly what that will look like.
Mm-hmm.
The world of digital currency, with the exception of the bank products like the debit cards and the credit cards, when you start to veer away from that, you start to enter into a world where it is unregulated because it is not backed by the government. And when you start going into that area, it makes it a very complicated, risky kind of thing. I'll kind of leave it at that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And an example I have about like no physical money is up here in the Northeast where Kim and I are from. We had Hurricane Sandy like 10, 11 years ago. And I remember like you couldn't even use a debit card anywhere for a while. No power means.
Yep.
So that's kind of a disadvantage of it. So what are maybe some other disadvantages of a cashless society you could think of?
Think that disadvantages of a cashless society honestly, it makes me a little bit nervous. I am quite a bit older than you, Katie.
I'm an old soul when it comes to cash.
Are an old soul, but I'm an old lady, so there's a difference. And to me, while I very rarely have cash on me, I always have it as a backup. I mean, right off the bat, we're talking about completely altering everything that you pay cash at. It now has to be set up to accept whatever the vehicle is to bring that currency. Now we're talking about a world in which any donation that you make, you're sending your child around to sell Girl Scout cookies. I hope they're walking around with their smartphone with one of those little things on it that you can run a credit card. I mean, it's the little things like that. I think it really will, in the future, revolutionize the way that we do things. But for right now, I think it's going to be a very rough road getting from being a cash is king society to one in which cash does not exist.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes it. You make a good point about those little donations and like little things you pay for in cash and such. So that is a good point about some disadvantages of a cashless society. But are there any advantages to it?
Again, I go back to, in my personal life, like I said, I don't like to carry cash if I don't have to. I have my debit card and a couple credit cards in my wallet. That's what I use. And matter of fact, my budgeting is done that way because I'm able to see at any given moment how much is being spent. Of course, one of the downsides of living that way is that more and more stores and restaurants are charging you hefty
Yeah, I
percentage.
was gonna bring that up. Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I had a friend of mine who went to a local restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
and there were five of them, and the bill was well over
Right.
$400. I can't imagine walking into a restaurant with $500 in cash,
Right.
because the alternative would be that the restaurant would have made so much money on my dinner. So we really got to figure this out.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We were ever to go to a cashless society, I feel like they would have to eliminate credit card fees. Us
Yeah.
having to pay, they would actually like have to, because some places, at least around here by us, it's like 5%. It's like a lot, which
Yes.
makes me want to bring cash more places. Like I find myself now bringing a cash with me. If I know in advance that some place is going to charge me, I'm
Yep.
bringing cash.
I
And
agree.
so that problem would definitely have to be fixed if we were
Mhm.
to go to a cashless society. What happens to cash production though in a cashless society?
There, it would halt. And when you're talking about the United States in general, if we went to a cashless society, it would force other countries to have to follow suit. Because if you're traveling to the United States, you have to have whatever kind of means of payment here that you had in, even if it wasn't what you had in your country. Because we're talking about no traveler's checks. So we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
no conversion of dollars. You would have to be literally turning money into whatever digital currency we have moved forward with. And that gets complicated.
That's what I was thinking too, because it would have to be completely worldwide. It couldn't just be the state. It would be a lot, especially for people visiting from other countries or
Or
whatnot.
even us visiting from other countries.
Right, exactly.
I've got this great card, but if France is still using a cash-based society, it's not going to mean a whole lot to them, and that's going to be a problem.
How safe would a cashless society be, do you think?
Really does depend on how it's
Right.
run. Just as we know with cash can be stolen, but so can debit cards. We have found, just by watching what's happened to major companies, that it is the people that steal from digital means, such as being able to hack into computer systems and companies and ATM machines and all of these things, they tend to be one step ahead. What concerns me is when you go to a system like this, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think it does make it easier, like steal and stuff, because especially with older people, I've experienced with my grandparents, they're targeted so much by
Yes.
scammers and everything. And like their passwords aren't probably great if they don't have anyone in their life to help. So it is kind of scary at that
Yes.
aspect. I mean, there are definitely pros and cons to a cashless society. I don't,
Mhm.
so I kind of want to talk about something else that's cashless, maybe touch on this about Bitcoin, and do you think it would be a good alternative to cash in a cashless society?
Thing about Bitcoin that always has me a little nervous is
Mm-hmm.
that Bitcoin is not protected by the government. So right now, money is protected by the government, Department of Treasury, and the whole nine yards. Bitcoin specifically was designed to work outside of government oversight. Whenever there is no oversight in money, it makes me nervous. The other problem is it's a very volatile product, so its values can go up. We've seen them go sky high, and we've seen them go off the side of a cliff just within hours.
Right.
So when you're dealing with something with such volatility, the dollar does not typically I mean, it can be volatile, but it's not volatile like that. It gives me a little bit of a pause. I'd like to see if that's a direction that we are going to go.
Mhm.
I would like to see how the government is going to oversee, if lack of a better word,
Mhm.
um, the whole crypto system.
Right, exactly. Because cryptocurrency is not regulated. It's not like the stock market or something.
Mhm.
And it can be confusing for a lot of people. So I think that is also a factor.
I couldn't agree
Yeah.
more. Between blockchain
Right.
and mining for coins and all of that, it's a
Right.
very complex system.
But yeah, it can definitely be confusing. With all this talk of a cashless society, do you think we're actually close to becoming a cashless society? I personally think like we're quite a little bit of a ways off.
I agree with you, but I have to be honest with you. I mean,
Uh-huh.
over my lifetime so far, we went from there being no such thing as an ATM machine, no such thing as the internet. We didn't have cable TV. Wasn't because we didn't want it, it didn't exist. There
Yeah.
were no cell phones. And so that really has, all of those things have really come into place over the last 35 years or so. And when you look at how far everything has come and how quickly, if you think about it, they have come. If I were to say to you in 1970 that you're going to be given a card and you're going to be able to drive up to a machine and it's going to spit out cash, you would have thought I was nuts. Now, a large number of us, that's how we do our banking. I think we're a ways off,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's almost, what's a ways off? Is it 30 years? Is it 50 years? I don't know. But
Yeah.
I would definitely say it's probably sooner than we would think.
I think, a cashless society may eventually come, but I feel like there's not a huge push for it yet. Like there's no hurry for it yet.
Right.
So I do think it could come soon. Maybe in my lifetime. I don't know.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. I think it may be, maybe not mine,
No.
but yours. Yes.
Well, I really think this podcast was super informative about being unbanked, about cashless society, Bitcoin. We really covered it all. Thank you for joining me today on the podcast, Kim.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I think that this may have been one of my favorite topics because it's so relevant right now. And it's just, as younger people are entering into seeing what the stock market has to offer and seeing, all of this, when they hear about products such as cryptocurrency and all, it's amazing how much they know about it and how they're teaching me. I think it's important to keep the conversation going. I really do. And I applaud you for, discussing this topic because it's not an easy one.
Definitely not easy, but it's definitely important to get it out there because I think it's something a lot of people don't want to talk about, but it's definitely good to get the information out there so people know.
I couldn't agree more.
So thank you again for joining me on the podcast today, Kim.
Oh, thank you so much, Katie.
Okay, thank you. Being unbanked is more common than you think. People might be unbanked because they don't understand financial institutions, they're located in a bank desert, or banking was never marketed toward them. Some people are new to this country and they may not understand our banking systems and therefore remain unbanked. However, it only takes getting your house robbed one time or a house fire to destroy all the money you have if you're unbanked. A cashless society will ultimately affect the unbanked. A cashless society, however, will make it easier to budget. Without cash, you'll be able to see every purchase you make digitally. However, a completely cashless society will completely alter how society is. In order for a cashless society to be successful, a worldwide change will have to happen. For millennials, you may see a cashless society in your lifetime. With that being said, that wraps up another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please rate and review us there. I'll talk to you next time, millennials, Gen Zers, and everyone else listening. Bye.